waking up is really starting to say, why do I do what I do? Why do I believe what I believe? Because we buy into a lot of limitations about our health, our lives, what's possible, just based on what we learned. And so we inherit these limitations. And it is through exposure to different ways of thinking and what's possible that we actually then, have a vision or an opportunity to create something different for ourselves, which is scary.
If you want to change your life, learn how to build authentic relationships. In this episode, I sit down with Mark Groves, a human connection specialist and the creator of Create the Love. Mark's dedicated his career to helping people understand the key principles behind meaningful relationships, both with others and within themselves. He opens up about the burnout that came with relentless growth from managing a rapidly scaling business and how he reclaimed joy by deciding to focus on what truly matters. For the busy professionals listening, we explore how you can build authentic connections, break free from toxic patterns, and align your personal and professional lives with your core values. Welcome to Move Your Mind, where we uncover why you are holding yourself back from getting the life you want and what to do about it. With the help from high-achieving guests and experts in behavioral science, personal development, and the health and wellness space. Join us if you're ready to move out of your own way toward your ideal self. I'm your host, Nick Brax, and I've been working in the health and wellness space for the last 15 years, helping people find direction and gain the courage to take control of their life. My mission is simple: to help you learn everything that I wish I knew so you can become your ideal self. Lacking guidance, I spent the majority of my youth feeling lost and disempowered, which led to depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and substance abuse. Looking back, I didn't have the vocabulary to communicate what I was experiencing. And as a man, I didn't resonate with the emotional language used in traditional therapy. I didn't need to talk about my feelings. I needed tangible solutions to guide me toward building a life I was proud of. If you can relate, then this podcast is for you. In this episode, we discuss simple strategies to build authentic relationships. If you're ready to take action and build a stronger mindset, then keep listening. Mark, so great to meet you, mate, and thank you for making the time. I know how busy you are, and really appreciate you sitting down and having this chat.
Oh man, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, really appreciate it. So we might just jump straight in. Just for our listeners, we always start off just asking for a bit of a backstory. So would you be able to share with us your background and essentially how you came to be doing what you're now doing?
Man, I think it's the founder of Apple. What's his name? Steve
Jobs.
Steve Jobs,
No.
yeah. I blank on his name for the first time. Steve Jobs, how he says that you can always connect the dots looking back.
Yes.
It's interesting to see the journey that I've been on because I was obsessed with understanding human behavior from a sales perspective. I did my undergrad in business, and then I actually worked in pharma for 14 years. And during that time, which started when I was 22, I had been in sales at an electronics store before that, basically like the Best Buy in Canada. It was called Future Shop. And I was just like, I wanted to understand, how do I get people to change their behavior, to change from one product to another? And then I went through a breakup, and I then took the scientific perspective that I had and went deep into the science on relationships. I really wondered, why am I so good at talking about everything but my feelings? That didn't make sense to me because it wasn't a skill set issue. There was something else going on. So then I became obsessed with understanding romantic relationships. And as I was doing that, I thought to myself, like, why is no one teaching this? Like, this makes no sense to me that we didn't learn this in school. This is, at that time, I'm seeing the science pointing, the longest running study on well-being, pointing that the greatest predictor of your health at age 80 is the quality of your relationships at age 50. Not just romantic, but all your relationships. So that led me to start writing about what I was learning, and started an Instagram account, started a podcast, and everything just, apparently other people were really interested in learning this too. And I left my career that I had and started working with people and teaching and traveling and teaching, speaking at conferences, working with businesses, just teaching from a different lens, because I found if I did a public event, like 80% of the audience would be women. But if I did an event at a workplace that was about leadership or sales, there was more men, or, at least on average, at least half were men. And so I was able to act, because as men, it's not like we're like, hey, I want to go learn about that relationship workshop. That's not a general norm. But if I can learn how to be a better leader, and what happens to be there is also relationship information about how I can improve my home life. Oh, wow. And I find men would then actually be the most engaged in those circumstances.
I love that. I love that. Well, and I love what you were saying before with, I've had this come up so many times on the podcast, the saying of, life only makes sense backwards, but has to be lived forwards, and, connecting those dots. And it's so true. I think we get so much anxiety a lot of the time about trying to work out, what's my purpose? What am I going to do in the future? But if you can sort of just go with, the road that it's taking you to, it often does connect, and you find out, wow, if I didn't do this thing all those years ago, I wouldn't have found my passion that I now love doing so much. And, the impact that you're making. I mean, even from my own personal experience, I reached out to you because my girlfriend loves your content. I've had a few people, talk about you. So you're clearly, getting you're reaching a lot of people, and, really getting these messages out there in a very impactful way. So I think it's, amazing what you're doing.
Well, thanks. I think it's important that we always note that if you just change one thing about your life's different. You're not where you are. You don't meet a certain person. We often don't like something about, let's say, our partner's past. But actually, if you change just that one thing about your partner's past, they wouldn't be sitting in front of you. So, recognizing that you can either have the perspective that everything that's occurred in your life serves and develops for who you are today and what's possible for you, or it doesn't. And so one perspective is empowering and the other one sucks. So we might as well choose the perspective that's empowering, that life is a curriculum. And if we're willing to actually read everything that's being presented to us and consume it and learn from it, it's really inviting us to create a skill set so we can change our lives. We can become what we're asked to become, which I think everybody is being asked to become something, if they accept the invitation, which we don't always accept the invitation, and that's okay.
100% though. And yeah, if you break it down like you're saying there, it's black and white, it's logic. There is a positive way that's going to lead to better outcomes, and there's a way that you're going to be putting attention into something that is only going to make your life worse. And it's so crazy though, like when you're even aware of it and you're in that moment, you're recognizing those patterns, it's still so hard to to change your thinking into that more positive lens.
Oh, it is. I think there's something collective too about sharing with other people the suffering, connecting with other people through the struggle, which obviously, that's a way that we can see that we're not alone. But we can get trapped in that story. And, whenever I talk about someone taking responsibility for their lives or saying, hey, the experience you had, turn that into an empowering process, often what I'll hear is, well, that's victim blaming, or this isn't about negating that people have been through victimization. It's about saying, are we going to live there? What are we going to do with the material that we're being handed? What are we going to, the process of alchemy, when they talk about the process of alchemy, there's a saying that alchemy doesn't care about the alchemist. It doesn't care about your feelings. Like, it just cares that you actually work with the material that's being presented to you. Its job is to generate a better version of you. And if you look at how the universe works, if you look at how biology works, it's always generating something better. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to be painful. I'm sure the caterpillar isn't pumped when it becomes a cocoon and turns into a melty sludge. Just like, I recently was learning about the life of a dragonfly, and a dragonfly actually lives most of its life underwater as a newt, or a nymph, whatever the term is. And then it comes out of the water and lives like a couple weeks to a month as a dragonfly. Like, that would suck that happens, that it goes through this place, this transformation where all of a sudden its body breaks down and wings shoot out its back. But it doesn't know what's going on in the moment. And I think That for us, we don't know what's going on in the moment when we're in the struggle, that we're actually growing wings, that we're actually becoming something different.
100%. I think it's such an important point, and I think that's where growth comes from. And if we were able to, just get our own way all of the time, we wouldn't learn those lessons. And I think, you learn so much more from failing, from falling flat on your face, from having things not go your way, than just getting having everything goes smooth. It's really what shapes us into the person we become. So I think it comes down to, would you say it's a big part of this is, again, what you were mentioning earlier, the lack of education in these areas? Is that, in your view, why a lot of us are not able to sort of embrace that discomfort and work through it and see it as a more, a necessary part of our journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of confounding factors that influence that. One that, I mean, your inability to take responsibility for your life is monetizable. So I can monetize your suffering by, you're feeling sad. There must be something wrong with you. Here's a drug for that. Oh, you're feeling disconnected from yourself. Here's alcohol. You don't feel like you're enough. Oh, here's plastic surgery. Now, I'm not saying that all those things can't have a place. Alcohol can have a place. Plastic surgery can have a place. This isn't a judgment of those choices. It's just that everything that we do in excess is to numb the feeling of not paying attention to what's going on in we're not listening. Like sadness has a purpose. Pain has a purpose. Anxiety has a purpose. We know that physically, like if you put your hand on a stove, you burn your hand, you move your hand. But if you're in an environment that, let's say metaphorically, or is burning your heart, it would make sense that you would change your environment. But because we're not taught that. We're not taught about relationships. We're not taught really how to be very discerning. And I would say there's, one, we don't tend to witness it through the generations that we come down. We basically inherit all the behaviors, or a lot of the behaviors, that our family has. And so unless there's an outside intervention teaching us, how would we know? It's like if you were born and raised by entrepreneurs, you would know that entrepreneurship is available to you. But if you're not, you're then raised in a school system that teaches you to be an employee. So, there's so many different reasons that we end up trapped in a story. I think what's really beautiful today is there's podcasts like yours. There's people, you want to learn anything, YouTube has videos about it. You can become a master at anything you desire. I really don't think there is ever an excuse now to not become everything that you can be. Like if you have a smartphone, which you can't even say that's an affordability issue generally, because there's people in the poorest countries in the world with Androids with connections to the internet that are building websites for people on other parts of the world, charging them, the dollar in their currency and making bank in their, you know what I mean? So yeah, I think it's probably a lack of just like seeing what's possible. We inherit other people's limitations. And that's pretty obvious when we say something like, hey, when you're a kid and you say, I'm going to become an astronaut, no one says you'll never be that, or generally they don't. But when you become an adult and you say, I'm going to do that thing, people will be like, well, have you thought about this? And that's how other people's beliefs become our own. And we don't just question that maybe their belief is wrong. And I think when you start to just say, and I think this is really ultimately what quote unquote becoming awakened is, and I'm sure there's a more spiritual version of this, but to me, this is like waking up is really starting to say, why do I do what I do? Why do I believe what I believe? Because we buy into a lot of limitations about our health, our lives, what's possible, just based on what we learned. And so we inherit these limitations. And it is through exposure to different ways of thinking and what's possible that we actually then, have a vision or an opportunity to create something different for ourselves, which is scary.
If you're looking to make a change, to lose weight, to get toned, to gain self-confidence, all in just 24 minutes a day, then go no further. You can check out the Move Your Mind community by going to nickbrax.start.page. Yeah, it's a terrifying thing, and when it's so far out of the comfort zone, but you need to take that personal accountability to really make those steps, and again, we need to be taught. We're not taught how to do it, and like you're saying, our parents or whoever it is, school plants all these different stories. Sometimes it's not even a story planted there. When I was, first starting a business and when I was moving overseas and different things, I had my dad, out of love, but saying to my face, no, don't do this. These are the risks, and
Mm,
etc., etc. And you get anxiety, and you have to really work
totally.
through these things. So it's such a difficult thing that we need to have that awareness about it, and then understand how do we actually take those steps. What I guess a question I have is what would be your advice to anyone listening to this interview if they've got these stories in their head and they've got anxiety and they don't really know how to get out of that? What would be a good first step they can take?
Well, first, the pathology of anxiety is the suppression of an emotion or more than one emotion. So that would mean we're not fully stepping into or expressing ourselves. And then we can look at how anxiety is also correlated to creating a future potentially that we may not desire. So if you see that, the lack of fully owning what is being invited through us, I really think that we're
Mm.
through our pains, through our sufferings, that's where our mission is usually born. And if you're listening and you just have this strange inkling to want to start to teach about relationships or to want to start to be a public speaker or to be a motivational speaker or to start a YouTube channel or to start gardening, it doesn't matter what it is. But if you just say yes to that part of the mission, most of us want, what will it look like in 10 years? What do I end up being successful? Those steps will never be given to you. Those answers will never be given to you because you have to follow the steps that are being presented to you now. So my advice would be, one, you have to say yes to the invitation. You don't have to, but you should say yes to the invitation, in my opinion. And then secondly, because the messages will just get louder if you know.
Yep.
And you might be at the point now where they're really loud. And so you just say, yes, I accept the mission. All right, show me the teacher I need. Demonstrate what I need to learn. You might have a call to go back to school, but just start to actually pursue these things. And to also know that you were talking a bit about this too, is like the uncertainty that is present with saying yes to something you've never done or developing a business you've never developed it's going to come with the unknown. And we have to learn to increase our tolerance for the unknown. My father did the same thing when I left my job. He said, why don't you just take a leave of absence? And I was like, Dad, that's like saying I don't believe in myself, And I think when also there is a romantic story that you should just quit your job and do what you love. When I first started teaching relationships, I had a teacher tell me, use your job as the investor in your future. And so I just started to build what I wanted to create while I was putting food on the table. And so that was easier for me and less anxiety inducing because I was still able to pay rent.
Yeah, exactly. Which is a great advice. I mean, there's a practicality aspect as well, and a lot of this show is about entrepreneurship. So I think that's such an important point as well. That yes, you need to back yourself, take that plunge, listen to your gut, and follow these things and take the steps. But also, you've got to do it in a realm of reality where you're making sure you've got enough resource behind you and you can support yourself and all that sort of thing. So I think, yeah, it's such an important point. I think what you're saying there really applies to anyone, because no matter what stage you're at, you can be at the top of your field in whatever you're doing and still be a crippling mess because you're always looking so far to the future and you're looking for this feeling that doesn't actually exist because you're attaching it to what this fantasy is meant to feel like. So I think that's such a important point for really anyone, because I think more than ever probably now we have so many perceived options and we're comparing ourselves to so many people that it can be really difficult to just focus on that next step. I mean, would you say that's something you see, that a lot of people struggle with overwhelm and just
Oh, yeah.
focusing on what's in front of them?
Yeah, they got so many options. You got Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube. I mean, there's probably more I don't even know about. Twitter.
Yeah.
And what is Snapchat? You got all these different pathways that you can start to create and express. The whole point is start. Because if I start a YouTube channel and all of a sudden it's not Oh, maybe I don't like doing video. I guess now I got to start over. No, you don't, because you just learned from starting the YouTube channel that that's not what you want to do. Now, I would say practically, as someone who creates content, I would personally, I don't now. So my platform is mainly on Instagram. But if I was to start all over again, I would not start on Instagram. I would imagine for a young person, TikTok's probably a good choice because your audience would be more there. They're younger. But YouTube to me and Twitter, because they actually pay you for your content. The other ones, unless you're converting someone from the platform to a product, and I'm talking more like digital based, but if you're a literal store or a literal product, those platforms can be helpful for you. But for me, as a content creator, I look at platforms like that are meta derived, and they basically are just extractive engines from the creator. You're going to post and post and post. You're never going to figure out how the algorithm works. You're always going to want to put on more content. And you're just when you think you got it, it's going to change. As where YouTube, although it does have an algorithm, it is saying, hey, like we appreciate what you're putting out here. And if it's good, we're going to show it to people. And if we show it to people, they're going to see ads and we're going to pay you for creating content that people want to watch. I think that's actually super smart. Now in hindsight, I can see that. I also think podcasts are a brilliant idea, radio shows, because you get long form relationships with people. They get to spend time listening to you. They get to know you. And although I know that we're told people's attention spans are very short, which is true, there are people that really want to consume long form content. And the podcast market is continuously blowing up. Continuously.
Yeah, exactly. It's an interesting sort of mix of, you've got the super, short TikTok sort of style content, and a lot of, people can't sit through watching a TV show or a movie a lot of the time anymore, or we just can't focus. And then these long form interviews where people will tune in. So it's this mix. But I think a lot of people are craving, real information and authenticity, and there's just so much crap out in the world that it shows there's such an appetite for that. So we need more people doing it for sure. One of the things you talk about a lot is relationships. You were mentioning earlier. What are some of the main issues that come up in modern relationships, if we're talking about actual intimate relationships? Because it's obviously such a jungle out there. How do you navigating dating apps? You're trying to they're just never ending. It's what would be some of the pitfalls or some of the things people are struggling with when it comes to relationships?
I'd say the first thing that people are really challenged with from a dating perspective is they're not really very clear on what they want. They don't write down like, what is the baseline must-haves? What are my non-negotiables? What are the things that are nice to have? Like really creating a list of everything that you desire in a relationship, but definitely being clear on what are non-negotiables. Non-negotiables are usually things like to have kids, not, has kids or doesn't, smoker, non-smoker, drinker, non-drink, these types of things. Maybe age, maybe, has been married, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. But people need to be very clear on those things. Secondly, and sorry, let me finish that. The reason that's so important is I see people dating, and when you're not clear on what you want, you'll go out with anybody. And when you're presented with someone you have a connection with, you won't be clear that they aren't actually aligned. And so I see this all the time, that someone will end up on a date, have a connection, and they are not discerning about whether this is a good choice. So we have a really hard time saying no to the wrong people. So I'd say the other challenge is that we need to learn how to say no to the wrong people faster. A lot of us will spend 10 years with the wrong person. Yeah. And then we'll finally get out of it and we'll be like, man, I knew on the first date, or I knew 3 months in, or I knew a year in. And so we have to actually get better at doing that. That's a skill that's developed through actually making really small choices that build self-trust. We hear the message from people like Jordan Peterson saying, hey, make your bed every day. Like clean up your room, he says. And why is it so important that if you say you're going to make your bed, that you actually do it? Well, it's not just because getting into a made bed is nicer. It's because when you say you're going to do something and you do it, that actually builds self-trust. Why something as simple as that translates to dating is that if you can't trust yourself to do something you say you're going to do, then you can't trust yourself to say no to someone who's not aligned. You can't trust yourself to have your own back when it really matters. So it's these like small muscles of self-reliance that are so important. The other thing I'll say is that when someone's not aligned and you have a hard time saying no to them, you'll actually not be able to trust your yes when you meet someone who you think is a good fit. What I mean by that is you can't trust your yes if your no is not fully authentic. Does that make sense?
That does make a lot of sense. Yeah, it really does. And yeah, because it's, I mean, if you don't know yourself well enough, how are you going to be able to make the right decision about what you're looking for? And I mean, are there a lot of people that are addicted to more the thrill of the chase, getting that next thing, and the feeling of often when it is the wrong match, you can stay in these relationships because it creates that that spark, that excitement, the not knowing what's going to happen, and that chaos. And I know for myself, I was chasing that a lot in the past. And when I met my current partner at the beginning, I was saying to her all the time, I was like, this is too easy, because we just understood each other, had aligned values. Right. And almost at the beginning, though, it was a feeling of, hang on, I almost was like, feeling like I need more chaos. I need to feel that rush. And I was associating that with what a relationship should be like, where that was never right. And whenever I had that in the past, it never worked out because we were clashing, but it was creating that heightened, that feeling. So I think that seems like something a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah, I think there's two parts to that. One is that if we're chasing people who are unavailable, it's usually because we're unavailable. You know, so I would be miscoding the uncertainty or the lack of them being able to show up for me or meet me. I'm miscoding that as chemistry because I probably, if I look back at childhood, I would have maybe a parent who wasn't reliable, wasn't available. I wanted their approval. So then as an adult, I chase this same feeling in relationship. So, there's a thought, which I generally agree with, that we're attracted to people who wound us in the same way as we were wounded by a parent. And so what happens as adults is we then are seeking to actually resolve that wound. So if I'm dating people who are totally unavailable, there's an opportunity for me to finally choose myself. So if I'm really being like, man, I wish they finally chose me. I wish they'd finally change. I wish they'd finally get sober. I wish they'd finally do this. I just want them to do that. That's generally a desire that we have that's coming from a kid place. And so really what I would then say, what would be choosing yourself? What would be showing up for yourself? I know for me, I did very similar to you, Nick. Chased unavailability. When I finally realized I was constantly going crazy because I was chasing unavailability, the chaos, but there was like a spark to it. When I met someone who, my wife now, who could fully show up for me, I was like, wait, what? Like, you choose me, you're available, you keep your word, you don't play games. Like, is there a trick here? Like, what's happening?
Exactly.
And I started to learn, like, it's amazing when you are with someone who has a calm and regulated nervous system, because you start to code love as reliability. And now that's the hottest thing ever, which I never would have thought that before. Like, man, that's sexy. But it's sexy when someone keeps their word. It's sexy when someone is reliable. And there's a strange tension that we can get lost in, which is, in relationships speak, they talk about the honeymoon phase, right? And that's when we'll do anything for the person. We'll like stay up late. We'll do things we never did before. And then all of a sudden there's this moment we hit where we're like, I don't want to do those things anymore. And you're kind of just boring. You're just a regular person now. They call that the fall from grace. So there's like a moment where it goes from this deep, like chasing new love to this more friendship-based love. And what I see happens in that moment is often we've abandon our own needs, our own desires, what we want. And so we unconsciously blame the person we're in relationship for the loss of our own selves. So that's where you really see the spark goes away long-term in relationship, because what happens is the two people become one, they fuse. And the language of movies and Disney is very much this: you complete me, save me, I'm living in a castle, I need you to ride in on your horse. So there's like this idea that it is beautiful to be completed by someone, that they're a missing piece. This is these romantic ideas, but it's not. Like the leaving of your own self for a relationship is not noble. It's that relationships should really honor two selves. When relationships honor two selves, there's a delineation between us and the other person, and it's actually the space between us that creates the tension and the chemistry.
Yeah, it's so interesting. It's so interesting because it's that natural thing where we've grown up with Hollywood films, with pop songs telling us that we should be chasing that. So it can be such a head fuck to really be trying to navigate through all of that, and you get so addicted to that feeling. But it's really not sustainable if you're relying on this person to complete you. How can you feel comfortable in your own day-to-day path that you're going on? You're going to be, questioning things. You're going to be anxious if they're not around. You're going to be worried. You're meant to feel the opposite and support each other. And again, that was a thing that I just wasn't used to until I had this relationship of just feeling like, wow, I am supported. Well, not only supported in what I'm doing, she's, really encouraging me to take it to the next level and to do this and trying to work out ways to, be part of that journey and not try and hold me back from things I want to do. But you shouldn't be trying to change the person, I guess, fundamentally.
No. And what do we do if someone tries to change us? We just push back more.
Yeah.
And what happens in relationship where there's one person who's like, I've got my stuff together and you're the problem, you need to change. What happens is the person who's the problem usually felt like they were a problem when they were young. So this is why it's a perfect alignment. Find someone in a relationship who wants me to change. I'm never good enough. This is usually the addict. That's how we know. But it could be anyone who just sees themselves as fuck up. And what happens in a relationship dynamic like that is one person is good. They appear to be good. But all their energy is going into trying to change this other person. The other person, in order to keep the relationship functioning, to make sure the person who's the problem solver has a job, has to believe that they're a problem. So both people never actually become fully adults, because both of those are childhood roles. So, and teenager roles, right? Like the problem kid is usually a teenager who's like rebelling. So we get stuck in these developmental stages. And then as adults, we're in relationship together and it's a perfect match till it's not, till we're like, wait, I want to get sober or whatever it is. And all of a sudden they get sober, or they let go of the belief that they're a problem and the other person doesn't have a job, and they realize that their addiction was trying to fix people. And so, I remember listening to, I think it was Michelle Obama, and she was saying that she brought, and everyone leave their political thoughts out of this, but it's like, what I thought was really fascinating about them is that she was saying that she thought she'd bring Barack to therapy and the therapist would tell Barack all the things he's doing wrong. But the therapist was like, actually, this is happening together. And Michelle, you got problems too. So I think there's usually one person in a relationship who maybe thinks their shit doesn't stink as much.
Yeah. And I guess that's how you get codependent relationships, when you've got two people that have these different wounds that are playing off each other, and you stay in that, like you were saying, unless one person makes that step to actually work on and resolve some of these issues. But and then it gets addictive. So is it sort of like any other drug, that addiction, whether it's using alcohol, drugs, sex, whatever it is it another version of an addiction?
Yeah, I mean, everything that we compromise ourselves for is not a healthy choice. Even choosing a relationship should always be simultaneous with choosing ourselves. But anytime we don't listen to the tension that's going on in our body and our heart, and we don't just speak truth to it. And doesn't mean like the truth. I mean, like, what is true for me in a relationship might be different than what's true for you. We could have the same experience of me being late for dinner, and my experience of that moment is different than yours. But what happens is that the relationship needs to be a space that actually honors both people's truths. I was talking about how it needs to have space for two individuals, but it also has to have space for two people's experiences, because both people's feedback to the relationship, and I'm talking outside the context of abusive relationships, because that's a whole other animal. But in regular relationships that we're in, where we fight about the same things, or we can't seem to get past a certain point, or sex has stopped, like, all these are opportunities to liberate ourselves from patterns, to free ourselves through the container of relationship. I really don't think, although entrepreneurship comes close, I don't think there's a more powerful and more potent container for change and growth and becoming the best version of yourself than relationship, because there's nothing that offers as many reflections to your own limitations, whether that's your ability to communicate, your ability to manage your nervous system and your triggers, and how you show up when you're stressed. Like, my wife and I just had a kid 10 months ago. That like amplified. I was like, wow, we're in a welcome to the next curriculum. Holy moly. And I'm sure for the parents listening, they're like, oh yeah, have 2, have 3. Because man, I was like, I thought I was good at communication. And I'm like, man, when you've only slept intermittently 3 hours, your communication skills, dude, maybe it's just me, but they didn't stay at an elevated state.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, congratulations on that, by the way. But
thank you.
So I guess it's that thing where we're always growing, and every stage, even when we feel like we've gotten to the place where we have reached our potential or reached, that level of growth, there's always something else. And it's, that's what I experienced. Yeah. With my partner that I'm with now, again, I'm talking about that a lot just because it's been so impactful, and exact same thing. It's just made me grow in so many ways, and I couldn't bullshit myself anymore. And anything that you're trying to get away with, and you're infuriated in the moment, but then you're like, oh, actually, you know what? That's I need to hear that. And I quit alcohol during the relationship, and she encouraged me to do that. And it's made. How's your experience been with that?
Profound, man. Profound. And it's not like I was waking up in a ditch, from drinking too much or things like that. But I had this gentle nudge, like, I think I should quit drinking. I just remember having that feeling, like, I should try it. And then when someone would tell me that they quit drinking, I'm like, wish I could do that. And I talked to one of my friends, Traver Boehm, and we were at a bachelor party together. What do you guys call it? A stag?
Well, no, we call it a bachelor party, actually.
Oh, you do? Okay.
We would,
Maybe I'm thinking of a British term. But
yeah, exactly.
He was having the time of his life, and he wasn't drinking. And I was like, how long have you not drank? He said, 4 years. Best decision I ever made in my life. I'm like, okay. And then when I finally quit, I remember I had like a guy's trip coming up. I was the MC of a wedding. I had another trip. And I was thinking, man, but maybe I'll just wait till the next event, right? But I was like, there's always going to be another event. And what I noticed was that the reason I was afraid to quit drinking was how it might impact the people around me. How will I connect with them? Everyone else is drinking at a wedding or at a bachelor party or a guy's trip. And I realized that was codependency, because it meant that I didn't want to do something that was best for me because of how other people might feel. And so when I finally quit, I got to be with all of that, with the tension that existed from being afraid of how people might respond, and knowing that the world goes on, knowing that if you could survive that, I mean, you just realize it's an unspoken social contract that people drink when they go out. It's how buddies catch up. It's, whatever it is. And like, my friends get together and have a beer. That's how they catch up. I don't have a beer, so how do I catch up without a beer? Well, you just drink water or whatever you drink. So it's been profound. How about for you?
Very, very, very similar experience where it's been, I mean, I've had to grow so much through doing it and confront so many things. And, exact
Same.
same thing that you're saying there, where you'll feel, I was realizing in real time when you're at an event or at a wedding, all of these different things. I'm thinking, I don't want to drink, but why is this urge there? And you're not wanting to, yeah, like you're saying, let other people down, or feeling like you're not going to be enough if you're, I was always thinking, if I'm out with people, maybe I won't be engaging enough if I'm out with them and they're on a different level. And it's all in your head. And it just, I enjoy going out probably more now because I can go and
Same.
being, well, because you're choosing to do it. And then, and that's the other thing I realized actually, when I have been in situations now where I didn't want to be there, I thought, okay, I'm going to leave, because why would I want to drink to, and to, feel comfortable here and be part of this
Right.
when I don't want to be here? I'm leaving. So it sort of makes you really just be more conscious about these decisions. And I think just seeing, and same for me, haven't had a problem with it. I did when I was much younger. I was binge drinking, using that to cope, but
Oh,
it wasn't a
I
problem. But it
binge
was,
drank a lot. Let me, yeah, yeah. I definitely had a problem in college.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Which, you got to get that out of the system. But
It's funny how it's so
it,
normalized, that
oh
in
my God,
college,
it's
like to
crazy.
black out, to whatever, or my friend used to call it time travel. But it's like, it's
It's,
normalized, but it's wild how bad it is for your body. And I remember
oh
watching
my,
a Huberman episode on alcohol, and it was like, how much alcohol is actually an okay amount? And he's like, actually none, but
yeah,
maybe a little bit of this or a little bit of that. But I was like, my sleep improved. I wasn't giving up other things I really loved in the mornings, so I go out
yeah.
hiking, I work out. Yeah, it's been amazing.
Exactly. Well, it's those little things. It's where, and that's what was frustrating me. It would be not really drinking a lot, but as you were saying, every week there's some sort of social thing, catching up with a friend, family, whatever it is. There's alcohol every one of them. It's just how people catch up. And I'd sometimes be having a drink, a couple, 2, 3 times a week, and when I didn't want to drink. And those little things make such a difference. You just got so much more clarity, so much more focus, so much more time for other things. But yeah, it's an interesting topic. The other thing you were saying, yeah,
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this too, because what we're saying about alcohol is really true of any way that we cope with emotion, with
yeah,
being, we were talking about the tension that exists when you don't want to drink and everyone else is drinking, and how it might make them feel if you say no. And because I've done this to a friend when they're like, I'm not having a drink. I'm like, come on, like, let's do some shots. What do you got to do? Like, da, da, da. And I'm
yeah,
actually like not honoring their boundary. And it's my
yeah,
own discomfort with their not drinking that I'm actually now projecting onto them, instead of seeing what can I learn through my reaction to their choice. And I'd say the most rampant addiction today is smartphones. Our phones and social media are rampant addictions. And if you look at it, like, just go to a restaurant, go to an airport, stand in
mm,
line. No one is looking at each other. They're all looking at their phones. And I'm not saying I don't do that sometimes, but I'm so mindful of it now because we are missing the opportunity to connect with other people. And I remember seeing a video where there was a woman walking down the street, and she had her phone and she was looking at Google Maps, and she like walked by this guy and went. And then there's another version of the story where she walks by this guy and she has a map and she asks for directions, and then it fast forwards to their future and they're married.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I think about how many things, not that technology can't be amazing, right? So this isn't shitting on it, but
mm,
saying that anything that requires us to like leave parts of ourselves, anything that we don't have choice about. Like, if you notice you're picking, I forget what the average person checks their phone like 180 times or something a day. It might even be more than that. But that's just automatic. So imagine, like, if we started to get more awareness around where our attention is going. Think about how much we binge television shows and movies. If you turn that into work and
yeah,
building your superpower, because like all of us have a special, unique, amazing ability. And it is incumbent upon us to spend the time to develop that thing. And we, as humans, our biology is hijacked by these things that hit our dopamine, because being bored is a process. It's the cocoon. Meditation is the cocoon. Learning is the cocoon. Just noticing the tension that exists when you want to go to your phone and just being with that. That's where creativity comes from, man. It's crazy when all of a sudden you know, the other day I forgot my headphones when I went for a run. And normally I listen to like a podcast or an audiobook. And I was like, oh, great. I get to be with the sounds of the forest. Like, what a gift.
Yeah.
I hadn't normally thought that way, but now I'm like, oh, I just trust I didn't bring them. Okay, let's go.
Exactly. It's just so normalized, and it's terrifying because it's such a part of life. I think it's so much harder to, manage social media use than quitting alcohol, because quitting alcohol, it's like I'm making the decision. It might be hard at the beginning. I've got to, put these provisions in place and it's done. Whereas this is stuff that we all are using every day, and it's only getting more rampant, and it's not really seen in as an issue in day-to-day interactions because everyone does it, but it is scary. And like you're saying, how on earth can anyone have time for creativity, have time to just experience what's in front of them, to get out in nature, to do any of these things when we're using every spare second we have to distract ourselves? It's so hard. It's probably the biggest thing I am trying to work on at the moment, just to get off social media, because it just takes up so much of your space, and time's precious. Like I don't think we're honest with ourselves enough about how little time we have to waste. You're going to look back and there's all these things we can do, but if we fill it up with all these distractions, you're just missing out on so many things.
Oh man, it's so true. I've really been thinking about that a lot more, because you get your screen report or whatever, and it's basically a job. And you're like, oh, I could have another job, although my job is on it sometimes. But I've been noticing how much it affects my psychology. I've had 5 people manage my social media over 10 years, including me.
Right.
Every single one of those 5 has experienced deep psychological strain at some point because of it. And it's not like my social media is incredibly intense, like I'm not talking about, generally I'm not talking about controversial subjects. I'm not creating like some sort of crazy meme account, like it's not that busy and it's not that crazy. But what I have noticed is that, like, if it's causing this with every single person, and I know this to be true about a lot of people I know that use social media, especially a lot of